Hey there, good people. It's your Crippled Critic, and I'm here with a brand new mic. I've been listening to people's feedback, and hopefully, this will help me sound a little better, easier for you to hear. I figured with me doing this continuously, I might need to upgrade and get a more professional mic, so hopefully, this will help. So this week I'm going to talk about Uncharted 4. I recently played and beat it, and it was a lot of fun. Before I get into the meat of the game, I want to talk a little bit about Naughty Dog and what they've done for disabled gamers, particularly accessibility options, and what it means for me and disabled gamers in general. Definitely over the years, Naughty Dog has had ups and downs with me when it came to accessibility options in their games. As you probably remember me talking about, I couldn't even beat the first Uncharted game because of it, and The Last of Us was probably one of the hardest games I ever played. But with Uncharted 4, there was a huge overhaul of control options that they added for the game, something that Naughty Dog called their accessibility initiative. They really went above and beyond and added a lot of accessibility options for disabled gamers. I'll put a link to this video that they posted below, but suffice it to say, they thought about disabled gamers. I've never known any other video game company, honestly, that puts this much effort into giving disabled gamers a voice. They actually got real disabled gamers to come and play their prototype and ask them questions about what would be good, easier for them to play. And I just think it's amazing, and I think more attention should be focused on all that they've done in that regard. But let me get into all that they've added for the controls. There's a lot to go through since they added a lot of different accessibility options, so I'll try to keep it short and sweet and just stick to the things that might need a little more explaining. So they, have the basic stuff like subtitle options and language options. They also have, different game difficulties, which I will say, in this game, when you change your accessibility options like aim assist or camera assist, this game in particular doesn't, penalize you for picking these things, meaning you will still, no matter what game difficulty you have, unlike the past Uncharted, it won't affect what you do with the options. I think Naughty Dog realized that shouldn't be penalized, which I think is really smart. So there's a lot of controls you can change. You can swap L3 and R3, the shoulder buttons, and the two control sticks. You can also look at different presets that are available and change them. Obviously, there's aim assist, just like in the other games. A little different, as there's actually now a sliding scale from 1 to 10 that I assume kind of lets you pick how closely the aim will stick to each enemy. I haven't had a chance to inspect this very closely, but if I could take a guess, I would say that it, the lower the scale gets, the more you probably just focus on the body of an enemy, or because when I had it all the way up to 10, and I had a lot of headshots with the aim assist. So it's very different and a lot more expansive, and I really appreciate that. And I think definitely a lot better than the other games. I'll go ahead and show you just what the controls are for the game, like just the original controls. Like I said, you can change them, and I'll just let you take a look at some of the things they've added. I'll go into more of the things they've added in the gameplay section of my review, but there's now a new button for using the grappling rope. But most of the controls are about the same as they were in other games. I really didn't have to change too much. There's a lot you can change, but I will, just a warning, I think R3 for zoom, it's not something you have to press, except there are occasions, and it's kind of stupid, but with the PS4, you can always put the button in any other area using the actually PS4's, customization controls. I really didn't have to change much though, and honestly, there's not much to critique with the controls in this game. I'll say maybe they could have just let you customize everything to your liking, and maybe not just presets or swapping certain buttons, but again, not much to critique. something kind of interesting that they added was an accessibility section within the options menu. It kind of just puts a bunch of the accessibility options all in one nice package for you. Like I said, there's the classic aim assist, but now they added camera assist, not just for when your character is walking around, but also when you're in the vehicle. For those who don't exactly know what that means, it's the camera sort of follows you wherever direction you're facing, so you don't actually have to change the camera much during the game. It just follows wherever you're facing, and that helps a lot, especially in fast-paced games. I've only ever seen this option in Dead Rising 2, if that tells you how rare that is, so I was really excited about that feature. Also, within the aim assist, there's this feature they added called Lock On Aim, and you can have it so you can toggle the lock on, meaning you don't have to hold the button down. You can just press it once, and I think that's great. Strangely, I don't really see that hardly ever in games, even in PC games. Within that, you're able to sort of control which control stick you're aiming with within the lock-on mode, which is sort of hard to explain without showing, so I'll go into more of that in the gameplay section. Also, there's something interesting they added for repeated button presses, which they're talking about quick time events usually, or turning a crank or lifting a gate. Now they've added so you don't have to tap it repeatedly. You can hold the button down instead. I will go into that later, but it's something that is usually tedious with the Uncharted games, but they finally, I think, fixed it. But yeah, and a lot of options, but definitely I would say the easiest I've ever had time to play this game, and I mean that in a good way. So the gameplay was really fun, lots of the classic cover-based shooting, but the pacing was probably the best it's been in the series, at least since Uncharted 2. A lot of shooting, but also just as much puzzle solving and exploring too. Like I said, there's auto aim in the game, but unlike in past games in the series, like when I reviewed the Uncharted collection, there were some problems. Occasionally, the controls would sort of force you to use default options only certain parts of the games, but it did happen. This isn't the case in Uncharted 4. You can use auto aim whenever, wherever. When you're hanging from a ledge, when you're hanging from a rope, even when you're using a Gatling gun, or even when you're using a machine gun turret. That was crazy. I was so happy that it didn't break up the action, because in other games I had to sort of pause and change the controls, but this really streamlines the whole process. This is the first game in the series where they added the option to lock on to explosive items, like, exploding barrels. It doesn't seem like much, but just simplifying this, helped a lot, and I was surprised. It can sometimes be a little confusing, what you're clicking on, what you're locking onto, but it is really helpful. I mentioned earlier the aim mode option, which basically means you can pick which control stick you want to sort of be set for aiming or movement whenever you aim. This option is really helpful. I don't see it enough in games. Please, developers, look to this because it's a needed feature. I mentioned before that they added the quick time event button that can be toggled or held down. I think this is a great feature because I really always had trouble in the original games dealing with stupid moments for opening gates or turning cranks. It took a lot more effort than needed. I always felt like they were a challenge in quickness and timing, and I never thought it was needed in Uncharted. So this is a great feature. Yes, awesome. Really happy about it. It also affects certain moments in melee, particularly like hand-to-hand combat. And this is helpful because I usually kind of miss a lot because of tapping the button, but you can now hold it, which is pretty cool. So there's definitely an improvement in gameplay, but in my opinion there's also an improvement in different playstyles. In this game in particular, they really changed the stealth. I And I'll be honest, I'm not really good with stealth in most games. The best I can do is games like Assassin's Creed or Metal Gear Solid. But I'll give you an example. In this game, they made it so easy to use stealth that in several levels of Uncharted 4, I didn't even have to shoot an enemy. I killed like 10 or 15 enemies just using stealth, and that was really fun. And gave me a different option. It's up to you whether you want to go in guns blazing, and they've added stealth in the other games, but they were always kind of a weak feature that didn't always work out. But this a lot better. I think it's they added sort of more cover, like tall grass or flowers for you to hide in, and it's a lot of fun, and a big improvement in my opinion. So as far as new features in gameplay, they added a grappling hook that you have to press R2 or whatever, depending on what you choose within the PS4 controls. But R2 is the default controls for it. I'd say it's beneficial. It gets you higher areas quicker. Just a word of warning though, for some people, there are several moments where you have to press the button very quickly before you fall to your death. It gives you plenty of time though. If you die, it starts you off like right before it happens, so I didn't have much trouble. They also added a thing called a baton, or a mountain climbing spike that you use to stab into walls. It's only in certain areas, and you can tell by the textures on the wall. Strangely, this item that they give you only happens near the end of the game. I'm not really sure why. It seemed kind of like a feature that they really didn't need, but it works similarly to the pickaxe in Tomb Raider game, although in my opinion this is a lot more simple, so I appreciate that. They accommodated the controls for a next-gen controller. Now you use the journal is used with the touchpad button. So yeah, warning for those who don't like that button or can't press it. I will say that it's not like pressure sensitive or anything, and I didn't have too much trouble, but there's that. Also, like in The Last of Us, there are moments where you have to use a flashlight. It's very rare. It happens near the end of the game, and the problem is just like in The Last of Us, you have to shake the controller, use the motion controls of the PlayStation controller in order to turn on or off the flashlight. But good news for disabled gamers, I decided to try and see what happened if I didn't shake the controller and just see, if it did automatically. And yes, after about a minute or two, it will just turn on or off on its own, so you don't have to shake the controller at all. Also, like The Last of Us, Uncharted 4 seems to use a similar engine, also including the AI system. And what I mean by that is your companions work a lot better. They don't seem to be seen by other enemies. Like when enemies are nearby, doesn't matter what your companions do, they won't trigger any kind of attack. They also tend to be more proactive in this game and will help you kill enemies a lot faster, and including stealth moments, which is really helpful, and it surprised me. Something really cool that they improved on is exploration in this game. Now, Uncharted usually is pretty linear in where you can go, but in this game they added whole areas of just exploring for treasure, and particularly Madagascar was the most fun I had in the game. They give you the ability to just drive around and just look for treasure, and it's not even something you have to do. It's a lot of fun, and I was really surprised at how big the areas were. There are also sections of the game that you can explore underwater, and they're mostly just for finding hidden treasure. It's optional, but there are parts of the game that you have to do this. You can drown if you're not careful, but the game sort of changes the hue of the screen when that's about to happen. These were a lot more fun than I expected, and I kind of wish they had more of it, but I'm just happy they had it at all. So the game looks amazing. The graphic quality has improved a lot since the third game. The environments look a lot more realistic. Shrubbery moves, plants move. The facial animation looks a lot better. You can tell that the motion capture actors, I think they modeled a lot of the characters based on them this time, and it just gives the characters a little more realistic look, which is pretty cool. So the story is kind of a mixed bag for me. You can tell this time they tried to go for a more mature tone. Neil Druckmann wrote the script for this game, and he's been a lead writer in the series since the beginning, along with Amy Hennig, but Neil Druckmann also wrote the script for The Last of Us, which also had a darker tone. And I think sometimes this worked for Uncharted 4. For example, early on in the game, there's a section where you play as Nathan Drake when he was a child, and he lived in an orphanage. There are moments that he talks about some of the kids saying that him and his brother were going to hell because their parents left them. And this is a very dark thing for a kid to hear, and it's kind of realistic in a place like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and kind of set the tone for the way he had to live. Although sometimes it just seems unnecessary. This time around, the game focuses on Nathan Drake as he settles down and lives a life of leisure with his new wife, an old adventure companion, Elena. But he longs for the adventure again. He's sort of an unwilling retiree, but they try to figure out a way to kind of push him in that direction again. In the case of the plot device known as Sam, his older brother. Yeah, Drake now has an older brother. And he's definitely one of those characters that's introduced and was never in the other games, but they try to explain it, and I would have forgiven the kind of weak storytelling when it came to him, except that Sam is kind of boring. I thought that, in the flashbacks to when they were kids, they did a way better job of building their relationship. It just felt more genuine. Maybe it was the younger actors, but the older version of him was just really boring and didn't have much personality. Even when the two of them were alone and adventuring together, it felt like he was an echo chamber for Nathan Drake. It didn't help that during the story, not to spoil too much, but Nathan Drake kind of throws a lot of his life away to help his brother, and for a character that we barely know, it just seemed forced and didn't really make me want to help Sam or anything. Like I said about the more mature feel, they tried to kind of delve into Nathan Drake's darker side a little bit, implying that he almost has an addiction to going on adventures, sort of pushing his family and friends away in the process. Kind of exposed some bad traits in the character that I really didn't need to see or care to see at all. And I kind of thought it was unnecessary. They do sort of fix a lot of the story problems that I had by the end of the game, but it made me think that maybe Uncharted didn't need the darker, grittier tone. Still, despite there being some twists and turns that kind of make the game outstay its welcome just a little bit, I had a lot of fun. There are still a lot of lighthearted moments in the game. I laughed out loud a lot of times with Sully. There's a lot of great side characters that are still there. You know and love them, so I wouldn't worry. Maybe not as good as Uncharted 2, but a lot better than the third game. So quickly, I want to talk a little bit about the multiplayer. I feel like they really kicked it out of the park, in my opinion. I can't really speak from experience, but that's sort of my point. Other than a few times with fighting games, I never really play online. A lot of the games online require a lot of precision and timing because you're playing with real people, so I never really get into it. But this time, Naughty Dog kept a lot of the accessibility options from the story mode. Not all of them. You can't, there's no aim assist, but I do kind of see how that could be sort of taken advantage of, so I understand. But I never play online, and this made it a lot easier, and it's a lot of fun. Also, good news for colorblind players. Naughty Dog has you in mind. One of the designers is actually colorblind himself, and he talks about in that video I mentioned earlier that he noticed during design of the game that you couldn't really tell the difference between the enemies and the good guys in multiplayer. So he asked some of the programmers if he could change the color of the good guys from green to blue, since he had trouble differentiating between the two colors. And they did. Pretty cool, huh? So yeah, just another example of how they are looking to disabled gamers and trying to help them. And it doesn't usually happen in most games. You don't make your own character in multiplayer. You choose from characters that were in the story, but you can customize their outfits and taunts and weapon types, but you have to earn them through playing matches. There's a variety of clothing you can find, though, and taunts and really hilarious dancing. So yeah, you can, if you're upset that some characters weren't in the game story-wise, you can play as a lot of them. Older ones, enemies, good guys, all your favorites, Chloe and Flynn, even Eddie Raja from the first game. In the multiplayer, they also added sidekicks and mystical objects you can summon to help you hurt other enemies, or boost your stats, or, help other teammates. I tend to use these a lot because I like to be a more support type during the multiplayer. Still, if you're not that good at shooting players, like I'm not, there are other modes that you can choose from in the matches, like Plunder and Command. Command is more about capturing certain areas of the map with your teammates, but there is the classic deathmatch too if you want that. So yeah, overall a really great game. And despite my problems with the story kind of being up and down, I really did love the gameplay, and I can't talk up the controls enough. Like, I kind of have to thank Naughty Dog. They put a lot of effort into giving disabled gamers more control options, more than any game company, like I said, and I gotta thank you, we really appreciate it. I would actually say that if you, aren't familiar with the series, just pick up the game, support this company that did so much for disabled gamers. Even if you aren't disabled, I'd say it's worth it. And again, job well done. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.